All right. So first of all, Adam, thank you so much for spending time to speak to FandomWire about Poker Face, which is one of the best shows on television right now, and anybody who is not watching it is like really missing out. Um, I just wanted to go ahead and start because you've worked on so many great shows, Succession, Fargo, Justified, and now you're directing Poker Face. What about this show stands out versus some of the other great shows you've worked on?
Well, two things that come to mind right off the bat are the kind of amazing and completely unique Natasha Lyonne and
Mhm.
Ryan Johnson. I think that the two of them have really put a stamp on this show in terms of its style and Natasha's abilities as a performer to bring that style to life. So that I have to lead with that.
Mhm.
Beyond that, what makes the show a little bit unique from the standpoint of the logistics of production are the fact that every episode is a standalone episode in terms
Yeah.
of I said to somebody the other day, it's sort of like having to do a pilot every 2 weeks because you've got other than Natasha, you have an entirely new cast, you have entirely new locations and settings. There are no standing sets because of the nature of the show. It makes for both great creative freedom on each episode to invent a sort of world that is appropriate for the episode, but also the challenges that come with having to kind of reinvent itself every episode.
Well, and you mentioned Natasha and Ryan, obviously. As you're going through the process of getting ready to direct an episode, how hands-on are they for your process?
Uh, they, they were hands on in a way that never felt micromanaging, but there's certainly a lot of thoughts in terms of casting, the guest cast. There's a lot of influence there. There was a sort of a desire to monitor the tone of the show and make sure that there was a consistency there, even though again every episode it could would often demand stylistic switching up depending on
Hmm.
the nature of the material. But there was definitely an involvement and an investment. But they were also both very busy. So as the director of the episode, there was a certain amount of autonomy, and I certainly never felt that I was being micromanaged at all.
Well, and that was one of the things I was going to bring up is both of these episodes feel so unique in your approach, even though they're back-to-back episodes in a shooting schedule or in the release episodes anyway. So I guess my big question is, where are you able to go ahead and insert your specific style into an episode versus the overarching visual aesthetic of a series like Poker Face?
That's a good question. I think there are definitely elements of my or any director of record on the show. My tastes and sensibilities, I hope, are informing things.
Hmm.
Um, I will say that in the case of Poker Face, because of because of the changing tone of each episode and the material having variations in terms of how dark or light or comedic any episode might be, and also the tremendous amount of film references that are in many cases baked into the material. There are strong guideposts, that kind of point you in a certain direction of what you want to fulfill. Obviously, with One Last Job, there was
Hmm.
so much of the both the rom com and the caper influences that we
Yeah.
wanted to emulate. So I want to say that I got to have a sense of freedom in exploring that, but again, the guidelines were baked into the material. So I was researching and revisiting Heat, and certainly looking at rom coms to feel not necessarily even specific things that we wanted to copy, but the spirit of the style of those films, and hoping that they would inform the episode.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, One Last Job is the one that is two very different genres coalescing into what I think is an absolutely beautiful story for a one-off, for us to understand Charlie even further. What is the most difficult part about handling the tone of, the heist versus the more romantic side of the show?
There really wasn't anything, rather than thinking of it in terms of difficulties, it just felt like a challenge to be, to really be present and checking in with oneself about where where the given point in the script was at any given
Mhm.
time, and whether the stylistic imprint that you wanted to be referencing was playing to its full effect. I will say that in both episodes, I had extraordinarily talented DPs. Christine Eng was my DP on One Last Job, and Terry Siegel, another truly talented DP. In both cases, I was very lucky in terms of the partnership and their influence over the look and feel of each of them. And it was a question of all of us checking in with each other as we were going and saying, is this the part of the story now that will most benefit from this visual approach and this style? So I wouldn't describe it as a difficulty, just a sort of responsibility.
One of the things that obviously makes Poker Face so unique is, like you said, the ever-changing casts. You have great, talented actors coming in and out, depending on the episode. You yourself have a long history in television and in film, as an actor who pops in and just gives a movie or a show a lot of energy. I mean, you have Emmy nominations for it. Um, how do you communicate to other actors how to bring that energy into an episode that they're only going to be in for an episode or two?
The caliber of actor that was cast over the entire season of a show like Poker Face, I think comes in knowing what the stakes are and knowing that there's a certain amount of that energy and that storytelling that is going to fall on their shoulders. And we
Mhm.
were lucky enough with our cast to have people that not only were aware of that, but kind of relish those opportunities to make the most out of any given material. Sam Richardson and Corey
Yeah.
Hawkins in One Last Job, and also I have to mention James Ransom, who played Juice.
Yes.
They all came ready to play, and so you know, I don't feel like I have to spend a lot of time convincing people of the importance of that as much as just sort of shaping it tonally and sometimes knowing when to stay out of the way, because with the caliber of performances we had, you don't want to fix what's not broken, and we had just great people. And I have to give a shout out to our cast on Sloppy Joseph too. These kids were unbelievable.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to have to do much more heavy lifting with them, but they came so prepared, so professional, and with a very clear idea of what they wanted their characters to be. And pairing them up with veterans like Margot Martindale and David Krumholtz, obviously along with Natasha, we couldn't lose. But I was very, very lucky in terms of the cast I got to work with. It was more often than not nothing but fun.
I was gonna say Sloppy Joe is one of those episodes where you have, Margot and David are so established, but then you're working with a new talent. I mean, Eva just pops off the screen. She's incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
she's going to have a huge future. Both
it,
of those kids. I mean, Callum already does. It was the
mhm.
second time I'd worked with Callum, actually. That's not true. It was the first time I'd worked with Callum. I then worked with him again on Night Agent. So
Okay.
I went, yeah. So he's going to have a very big career. Both of them will. Yeah.
And how do you kind of approach directing children or just letting them take charge? Like, how's that give and take? Because it's a little different than when you're working with adult actors.
um, I approach it really in some ways similarly to how I approach working with actors in general, which is
Mhm.
to remember that there's no one size fits all in working with any actor, adult or child. That what works wonderfully for one actor would completely throw another actor off. Some actors want to be nurtured and spoken to and communicated with a lot. Some actors really want to be left to their own devices, and need the space to kind of feel that they have ownership and over what they're doing. So in working with kids, there's a wide range of experience and commitment. And my first job in working with kids is to figure out exactly how seasoned they are and what they may need, and then take it from there. But first and foremost, more and more, both in my work and my life, I feel like the main objective is to be present. And if you're really present and in the moment and paying attention to the specifics of uh, what you're dealing with, you'll be your most effective.
So obviously, you had already mentioned earlier that there's a lot of cinematic references just in both episodes. Obviously, a lot in One Last Job, but also in Sloppy Joe, Joseph. There's tons going on there. Was there a favorite reference that you were able to insert into the episodes that really you were so excited to put into it?
Uh, I love. There's a montage in One Last Job that I loved participating in. Well, actually, interestingly enough, there were visual imprints in both episodes that
Hmm.
both were montage or montage like. The preparation for the heist and when they get into the kind of Ocean's 11, this is what we've got to do. These are the hours that stores open. This is how we've got to be prepared.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And there was a strong desire to kind of emulate those kinds of those kinds of montages from that kind of heist movie. And in Sloppy Joseph, the opening of the episode, the introduction into Ava's character, and the kind of we didn't want to copy, but we wanted to be inspired by a kind of Wes Anderson, introduction into this kind of heightened, childlike storybook intro to it. That I think really set us off on the right foot, and it also helped establish in a subtle way the difference in the adult and child perspective in that episode that we wanted to employ. And there again, that was beautifully baked into the material by Kate Thulin's script, which was very inspiring the minute I opened the pages on it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching Sloppy Joseph, I was like, "Oh my God, they're doing like a combination of like Rushmore and Isle of Dogs right out the gate." And I was so in love
Yeah.
with that. So it was incredible. Um, you're obviously an actor in your own right. Is there any chance that we're going to see you in a future episode of Poker Face?
Um, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I will say
Mhm.
if that's something that people are interested in, don't give up hope.
Good. That's amazing to hear because yeah, I think you would add a lot to a show like Poker Face. So other than Poker Face, what else do you have on the horizon? Obviously, you mentioned you're also a director, Night Agent. What else can we see that's coming up in the near future?
I went right into a block of episodes on Night Agent
Mhm.
after the season on Poker Face had wrapped up, and I'm happy to report that I just found out last week that I'm going to be moving into a project I'm very excited about. Later in the summer, we start prep in earnest, start shooting in the fall. A project that Sean Ryan is also involved with, um, called American Hostage.
Okay.
John Hamm will be starring in it. It's an eight episode limited series that we'll be doing for. Geez, it just went right out of my head. Uh, Sony and MGM
Okay.
Plus. Yeah, yeah.